The story has made me who I am. It has absolutely had the biggest impact on my life. It's carved a life's path for me, karmically and dharmically, and it is where a lot of the messages that I have to share here on YouTube come from. So much of it is about realizing just how short and precious this life is. So that being said, I thank you because I believe that in sharing this story, each time I receive that much more healing. And my healing is your healing, and your healing is my healing. So let the sharing begin. Biggest story that I carry, and if I had but just one story to share with the world, to share with you, it would be this one. So I'm going to drop us into the middle. My brother and I are at Salt Lake City, Utah Hospital in an emergency room where my dad is on life support. He is strapped to a bed in a tangle of tubes and wires and beeps, and the bed is cranked upright to the max. He's probably at a 45 or 50 degree angle to quell the swelling that's happened in his body. And the doctor has just explained to my brother and I that he's suffered such severe organ damage and brain damage that if he were to come back and survive, he probably would not be the same person. He would probably be a vegetable, so to speak. And my brother and I now have a decision to make. The officers and our other friends have just left us alone in the room. And my younger brother and I look at each other because we have the biggest decision of our lives to make, and we both just want to wake up out of this nightmare. Just the day before, I was in Chicago, and that's where I lived at the time. I was living on my own in an apartment in the city, working for a big corporation, and I had been there for 2 years. And I was part of the raw vegan community out there, so it was the weekend, and I'm attending this raw vegan potluck event and speaker event. And halfway through, I go to my car to retrieve something that I had forgotten, and I look at my phone and I got a missed call from my dad and so my parents, because they're together, and they're actually riding their Honda Goldwing, which is like a Cadillac of motorcycles, all up the continent to Alaska, from Southern California to Alaska, to watch, in the hopes of watching the Aurora Borealis, of catching the Northern Lights. And so they had been to Fairbanks already. It was a 2.5 week trip. My dad had 3 weeks off. And they went to Fairbanks, Alaska, and they were on their way back. They were almost at the very end of their trip. And I listened to the message walking back to the event, and my dad says, "Hey sweetheart, it's your mom and dad. We're just calling to see how you're doing. We just visited our friends out in Idaho, and we're on our way back home. And well, we love you, and we just heard you did a half marathon, and we're so proud of you, and we'll talk to you later. Bye." And super sweet, loving message. My parents were really, really so blissed out and almost in their retirement. So they sounded amazing, and I walked back to the event with a smile on my face, and the event then ends, and I'm walking back to my car, and I look on my phone, and I got another missed call from my dad, which is weird because he just left a message for me. And I open up my car, and the phone rings, and it's my dad. And you know, this feeling this feeling like something's not right, and you don't want to pick up the phone. I had that feeling, afraid who I'd hear on the line, whose voice it would be, and I pick up the phone, and it's not my dad's voice. This man is saying, "Ma'am," he says, "this is Officer so-and-so from Pocatello County, Idaho, your parents have just been in an accident and your mom has just been killed on impact and your father's been severely injured. Somebody has hit them, but we've got him. There's just a giant black hole that's opening up underneath me, and I'm just saying, oh my God, no. He's saying, call this number, come to Salt Lake City, Utah, hospital tomorrow. This is where we're rushing your father right now. I've just spoken to your brother and your uncle. I get off the phone and half my purse is rolled under my car on the asphalt, and the doors open and I just sink into the seat, and yeah, I just start crying. This is too much to actually happen to anybody. This is something out of a nightmare, and how could this be happening to me? I just sit in the car and start crying, missing my mom, thinking about my poor mother, thinking about my dad, wondering what's happened to him, seeing visuals of my mom flying and my dad's face as he sees her as he's flying. And I just sit in my car and I just can't believe they left this message on my phone just 2 hours earlier. That night, I somehow managed to pack up a suitcase for myself in my apartment, call my brother. I don't think that we had a long conversation. We were just in such a deep shock, and we knew we'd see each other the next day. I just wanted to make sure he could get himself to Salt Lake City the next day, and called my landlord, told him I wasn't sure when I was going to be back, and I would call my boss the next day, and got Southwest on the phone and got a bereavement flight to take the first flight out of Midway that following morning. And the airlines help people out in situations like this, and somehow I sleep that night. It's funny, life's bigger hurdles are somehow more manageable, for me at least, than the small things. I knew I just needed to do the next thing, and I went to sleep. Early the next morning, I was on the first flight out of the city, and as the plane started to lift off and that gravity kind of lightened up on my body, perhaps because my emotional armor also started to lift off, or perhaps because there was nothing else left for me to do now that I was strapped in on the plane except to be, I started to sob uncontrollably. I was really close to my mom. She was a friend to me at that point, and we had come a long way in our relationship, a very, very long way. And I just started to think about my beloved mom and how I would never see her again. And this kind of was going on in my head. I'll never see her again. I'll never see her again. She won't be there at my wedding. She won't be there for my child's birth. If I have a child, she's not going to be there for any of that. She won't be there for my life anymore. And I also realized that this flight was really marking the end of an era for me, or the beginning of an era of not having her. I also didn't know the condition of my dad, and the way that the officer was sharing with me about him seemed pretty bad. And I had this feeling on the plane of being an orphan already at 25. People were looking back at me concerned on the plane, and my neighbor was trying to console me and hand me tissues, but I just curled up even deeper inside myself and told them to leave me alone and let me be, and I'm okay. But obviously I wasn't okay. I cried for a good while. So now we're at Salt Lake City, Utah hospital. I've gotten scooped up by these sheriff department officers, friends of my father and my brother at the airport. My brother got a courtesy flight from Southern California with the sheriff department, and escorted by these two men. And also with us is my dad's best friend who lived not too far away from Salt Lake City, Utah, and somehow heard the news and came with his wife. So we have a support team of 4 adults. And these 4 angel guardians of ours have just left us, my brother and I, alone in the hospital room to make this decision about our dad, whether or not to keep him on life support. And the door closes, and my brother and I look at each other, and we already know my mom and dad were soulmates. They were soulmates to the very end. And I think that their marriage really got rekindled once my brother and I both left the house and they started riding on a motorcycle again together. They got a Harley Davidson, then they got a bigger one, then they got a bigger one, then they got this Honda Goldwing, and they were just like children again, getting younger and younger by the year, exploring different cities and towns and farm stands and all sorts of places, visiting their friends around the country. Our dad would have a very, very hard time being on this earth without our mother. Yeah, we knew that he was gonna be happier with her wherever she was, that he would immediately go to her. If he wasn't already there already, we couldn't help but wonder if he saw her fly before he flew. He probably left his body at the same time she did, because he was no longer recognizable to us in that hospital room. He looked so full of pain and suffering, and he was so swollen, inflamed everywhere. He looked more like one of his heavier set brothers in his face and body. And so we started to say goodbye to him, and each of us breathing and sobbing into the side of his neck, saying what we needed to say to him and being in our sweetest memories with him. And even we'd take a picture of each other with him, and it was absolutely surreal. And when we were finally done with our goodbyes, we open the hospital door and are embraced by our 4 human angels, and they know what decision we've made and they support us in it. And what we have to do next is go to see the motorcycle, because they have towed the motorcycle somewhere near the hospital. The motorcycle is a wreck. It is smashed to pieces. It's gone too. It's clearly dead in the beyond the beyond. And it's almost heartwarming to my brother and I. And we hold on to this beautiful angle of the story that all 3 of them left together, because this damn motorcycle was in so many photos, epic photos, with the 2 of them or one of them or by itself off, this like cliff in the background or these mountains in the background, like looking just so epic. And we inspect the motorcycle close up to see what belongings of our parents we can salvage from the wreckage. And amazingly enough, we're able to grab a few things, a little journal that my mom was keeping while they were traveling, and camera and all the film. And they had taken 4 rolls, I think, from that trip. So that was really a massive blessing. Yeah, we took a little souvenir from the motorcycle of the Honda Goldwing emblem that they placed on each side of the motorcycle, and we said goodbye to the motorcycle. So next we go to the funeral home to see my mother, where they're holding her, and the director welcomes us in and says that they've cleaned her up. We my brother and I each go in to be with her separately this time. So I get to go in and say goodbye to my mom, and it's awful. It's awful to see the body of a loved one that's no longer inhabited. Yeah, I was really close to both my parents, so this was really hard. But I said goodbye to her as best I could, and she was just growing wiser and more joyful as she aged, and she would send me letters in the mail just praising me and encouraging me and giving me money to go out to dinner with a friend, or giving me a little coupon for a shopping date when I would go back home for the holiday or whatever. She was so thoughtful. It was really hard to say goodbye to her, and after my brother said goodbye to her, we asked for her ring, the wedding band, to be cut off her finger because the finger was so swollen, and we asked for a lock of hair to be cut, and we just had to do these dreaded things like sign cremation papers and pay for the bill for that. And yeah, my brother and I both felt like they would want to be spread. They would want to fly one more time. My dad used to be a pilot, and he would fly planes, and yeah, we just wanted to spread their ashes in the sky. So we did that. That night, my brother and I share a hotel room and a king bed or something, and we're emotionally exhausted, beyond emotionally exhausted. And we're doing well. We're holding ourselves together, and yeah, we don't lose ourselves altogether that night, even though we could have, because we know that we have a long ways to go and that we've got to stay strong for each other. And I remember talking to him, I remember telling him there's no such thing as death, and they are truly just pure positive energy now. They're gonna be with us forever, just in a different way. Their souls are eternal. They're together. There's no such thing as a tragedy. There's no such thing as an accident. They must have been ready on some level to go, and therefore they must have known on some level that we would be okay, that we would be ready to live without them. And you know, they wouldn't want us to be too sad. They wouldn't want us to be too upset. And of course we're gonna be sad, and of course we're gonna be upset, but they would want us to celebrate their lives. They would want us to cherish being their children and to remember them forever in gratitude and appreciation. And I went on like this for a little bit with him, really sharing with him what I knew, what I had learned from Abraham Hicks and Law of Attraction, and listening to hours and hours and hours of seminars with them, going to see them once in Chicago. And this is what I knew from my heart of hearts, and I needed to share this with him because I was the bigger sister, and I was thinking this the whole time because somebody had hit them. Somebody had hit them from behind while they were stopped at a stop sign. This guy was high on snuff, hit them while they were stopped, so they flew. He tried to run. So I also tell my brother, let's not sue. Let's not have anything to do with this guy. There's spiritual karma. He's gonna pay for this karmically. He's gonna have to live with himself. That's the worst punishment. I don't want us to be in jail litigating for the next couple weeks or months. Like, that's not what we need right now. And I held my breath to see what he would say after I said all that. And he said, yeah, okay, yeah. And I was relieved. We hug and we cry silently together on this bed. And it had been years. It had been years since we had shared the same bed, decades probably. But this night, we feel like children. And we want nothing more than to be snuggled up in bed with our parents. My brother and I would have a memorial service that would celebrate their lives. We wanted to celebrate the F out of our parents, actually. It was amazing how held we were, probably in this collective prayer of everyone who really loved us, cared about us, who really loved our parents. But I found a non-denominational reverend. I was really adamant about not having a religious reverend. I wanted somebody that really knew that there was no such thing as death. And so we got to have this beautiful service, and the church was packed to the gills, and then our house was packed to the gills afterwards. It was, amazing how many smiles there were kind of solemn smiles, but I think that people were really proud of how we were handling it. We would have to go through the entire house contents in the next month and pack things up, sort through things, sell things. We'd put the house on the market. We would have an attorney start to help us in closing the estate of my parents, help us sort out the will and trust of my parents that was really outdated. It was a lot of work. It was really, really hard. And I would go back to Chicago about a month afterwards, after they died, because I had to return to work and my brother had to return to school. It took me about 10 years to fully grieve the loss of my parents. And this is the part of the story that I want to share with you today too, how that grief, because it wasn't fully felt, I kind of spiritually bypassed.
I did spiritually bypass
a lot of that very real, heavy sorrow inside my being. That this grief is within us on multiple levels, multiple dimensions, aspects, spiritual, mental, physical. And I got the spiritual part, probably aced it, but on a very human level, I didn't give it proper recognition. I didn't give myself, my life, proper recognition and processing of the loss, of the tremendous loss. So it took me a better part of 10 years, because by the time I realized I had something that I was repressing, and that was grief and childhood stuff, that grief was petrified by then. It had become hard, and it had become really hard for me to access. So I share this story today with a lot of love and a lot of compassion for myself, and a lot of desire to, as Martine Pretchell says, I dream I can make a garden out of everything I've ever lost. I love and appreciate you so much. Please leave a comment below and let me know what you thought, or let me know what you'd like to hear me talk more about. Maybe there's something that intrigued you about the story. So in the meantime, please know that this life is short, and if there's someone that you want to express your love and appreciation for verbally in a real way, please do.